everyday narratives, of neighborhood leaders, of community activism, of art, of popular art, of Saturday night jams where people, get together to blow off steam after a hard week of work. And that narrative is of immense merit also in an academic institution. And that, the notepad scribbles of a 16-year-old Mexi Ray coming up with MC routines for his hip-hop group truly warrant a place next to a Shakespeare folio or a draft of the Gettysburg Address or some of these other baffling treasures that exist at the Cornell University Library. So I commenced, 6'5", with a Swedish accent and a slightly befuddled academic dress sense to investigate the South Bronx and Mount Vernon and Co-op City and North Harlem and South Harlem and all over the place, and using the research skills that I was provided by my academic parents and by my university studies to really attempt to locate as much source material as I possibly could. And, speaking of punk, which is the book that I'm currently writing and researching, which is a book on the aesthetics of the punk movement, the people who were punk rockers back in the late 70s, they might have enjoyed posing as working class, but they were sons and daughters of the middle class and sons and daughters of education. And their ability to self-document is almost shocking. There would be some sort of concert or some sort of club night or some sort of event in the summer of 1976 in Manchester, England, attended by 40 people. 20 of those people would have a handwritten list of who actually attended, who played, what the set list was, and maybe they even brought a camera and took some photographs. Hip-hop was about Saturday night. And when Saturday night occurred, hip-hop was about next Saturday night. This was grassroots artistic expression in the community, of the community, and by the community. There's nobody with a camera there. There was nobody, except in some lucky cases, who kept flyers. There was nobody who, snapped away roll after roll after roll of the film, except for in some lucky cases. There was nobody who recorded it, except for in some lucky cases. So it was not a culture that had any kind of self-documentation idea ingrained in it. This absolutely categorically didn't exist, which made the puzzle so much richer and which made my work so much more difficult / delightful. So initially, over the course of the first couple of years, it was a lot of dead ends and a lot of baby steps and a lot of reading and trying to find out what journalists had actually written about these events as they were unfurling. Very few did. And to find out what recordings, what sound recordings actually, existed. And that was hardly any either. Because one of the many things that is so fascinating about this culture is that it was a living, vibrant, performance-based culture for years, for 5 years, 7 years, 9 years, before there was even one vinyl record that came out of this community. Through a variety of through dumb luck, I came to meet people like some of the distinguished gentlemen in this audience, like Curtis Sherrod, Mexi Ray, of the Nice and Nasty Three, like Disco Wiz, like Joe Conzo, like People Are Not Here Tonight, like the great flyer artist Buddy Esquire, like the great flyer artist Phase 2, like arguably one of the greatest MCs of all time, Grandmaster Caz, like journalists with a passion for it, like Nelson George, masters of the graffiti form like C, who all would, it baffles me to this day, would see my goofy enthusiasm and take me under their wing and share my vision and see that it was important not only to attempt to put together a book. We're very proud of this book and very, very happy with it. But even more importantly was to create an archive that would preserve this for people who aren't born yet. And these materials are extraordinarily ephemeral. They're ephemeral in a way that is really hard for us as book collectors and collectors to understand. They were ephemeral like the MASH notes you wrote to a girl in 8th grade. They were ephemeral like a favorite mixtape that you made for yourself as a teenager. And these are the very building blocks, not only for the worst of 2009 hip-hop, but it certainly is the building blocks for the very worst gun-toting bling hip-hop that, will disgust us in the New York Post once in a while. It is also the building block for the most extraordinary strand of global minority activism and community pride and friendship-making activity that I know of. And that comes from this extremely small geographic locale. And it was created by people who number in the hundreds, about 30, 35 years ago. I brought a handful of little show and tell items because I don't even know how to spell a PowerPoint presentation. But I wanted to pass these around to give you an idea of the vibrancy and the ephemeral nature of what we're talking about. These masterpieces of pre-desktop publishing, they were all done with rulers and magic markers, and they were cut out with like straight razors and glued together and then brought to the neighborhood Xerox store. Here's a masterpiece by Phase 2. Here is another flyer masterpiece by Kool Herc, arguably the founding father of hip-hop, who threw what is considered the first ever hip-hop jam in 1973. Here is an original paste-up by my favorite artist of the era, Buddy Esquire, which will give you an idea of how meticulous the craft of putting these together are. And I'm also going to bring up an anecdote about that in a few moments. A nameless flyer executed by little sure shots who had rub-on letters and a magic marker. Pass it along with me. Another example of the work of Buddy Esquire. And please remember as you glance at these, that these beautiful examples of everyday art were executed to be thrown away, or in some instances they are hopelessly rare, because if you brought this flyer to the door of the venue, you would get $1 off the cover price. Here is a list handwritten by Curtis Sherrod, Mexi Ray, at the age of 16 or 17, outlining how to distribute the show flyers, who would bring flyers to what high schools in order to distribute them by hand to make it known that the event was actually on.